Thousands of years ago, planet Earth was taken over by an ancient alien civilization. They came, they conquered, they bred, and they fought a mighty war between each other. They left behind a history of their occupation. We have proof. Vestiges of a long-lost culture from another planet remained behind. All-powerful and terrifying beings with ultimate knowledge walked our planet for generations, and then suddenly they left. Mankind remembered their time and wrote down their history in stories. Today we call these stories religious texts, fables, and mythology. And yet these tales, scattered across the globe and across time, all unite in one grand and all-encompassing story of the ancient aliens. After eons, these beings returned and are even now doing battle with humanity in a secret war your government is hiding. Even worse, secret societies of the world knew all along that they would return. In Christianity and other faiths, it is reviled, and this itself is a folk memory of a fearful and warring past between mankind and the serpent aliens. Nevertheless, the historical truth is that the serpent is there, and it is the root of all major religions. This has been proven again and again, both from scriptures and archaeology. They are the serpents or shining ones spoken of again and again in literature. It was these shining ones, or serpents, which were the lights in the sky that descended to earth. They were the lights that our ancestors saw in the sky. the sun, moon, and stars, but these lights came down to earth and settled amongst us. The lights were the ships, the craft of the strange, serpent-like humanoids that stepped off and walked among mankind. These tales are global, and even within Christianity itself. A general term used for these early Christian Gnostics was Ophites, which means serpent worshippers. It was this group that wrote the New Testament. Epiphanius said, "The Ophites sprung out of the Nicolaitans and Gnostics, and were so called from the serpent which they worshipped. They taught that the ruler of this world was of draconic form, and the Ophites attribute all wisdom to the serpent of paradise, and say that he was the author of knowledge of men. The guardians of the very history and religion that would become Christianity was in fact based on and fostered by those who worshipped the ancient wise alien serpent that came and taught mankind. The ruler of this world was of draconic form. It was the dragon, the winged serpent, the shining serpent that could fly. It was ultimately wise and should be worshipped as a god. In Britain, the serpent god was Hu, the dragon ruler of the world. The druid was known as a Nada, now known as an adder, and the serpent adder was the symbol of the god Hu. The druids were Ophites of the original stock. So, in this respect, the druids were probably the last truly serpent-worshipping priests in Europe. A remnant of ancient days, long forgotten, but remembered in words and deeds. Over thousands of years, and across hundreds of cultures, the history of this ancient invasion by the great shining ones from the heavens altered and became legend and myth. Much of it turned into the great religions of the planet. But hidden in these stories is the real, literal truth of an invasion of a planet Earth by beings so strange that we called them serpents. Ancient man left cave paintings and tales of their coming across the world. The great guardians of the Shining Ones, known as the Watchers, mated with human females, cruel from the sky. Our ancestors worshipped them for their amazing power, and yet, in our modern scientific age, we can now see things more clearly. These were not angels or messengers of light. These were not great Greek deities sat on high and issuing commands. They were not the many-faced Hindu or Egyptian gods. These were beings from another planet. It was the land whose name, Shumer, literally meant the land of the Watchers. It was indeed the Egyptian Ta-Neta, land of the Watchers, the land from which gods had come to Egypt. So Sumeria means land of the Watchers, and it is from this land that the Elohim, or Shining Ones, who govern the Watchers, also came. This is the land of origins and of governing gods. These are the aliens of ancient times. Julian Jaynes, in The Origin of Consciousness, in the Breakdown of Bichomerical Mind, tells us something interesting about these governing gods. Throughout Mesopotamia, from the earliest times of Sumer and Akkad, all lands were owned by gods, and men were their slaves. Of this, the cuneiform texts leave no doubt whatever. Each city-state had its principal god, and the king was described in the very earliest written documents that we have as the tenant farmer of the god. Anybody who has seen the movie and TV show Stargate will now see just where this modern entertainment first got its ideas. So let's just take a look at these Elohim for a moment, to find out who these gods were that enslaved men and were in charge of the Watchers. The term Elohim, used often in the Old Testament and other texts outside of it, as in the Muslim Allah for the Lord, this is an incorrect usage, as the term is plural and means shining ones. We can see this plurality in the text from Genesis 1:26. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." And again in Genesis 6:2, "The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair." This term, sons of God, is literally sons of gods, and comes from Ben Ha-Elohim, sons of the shining ones. The term, in fact, seems to be around the globe. The Sumerian El means simply bright or shining. The Old Irish Elilil means shining. Old Cornish El means shining. Elf means shining, hence elves as tall and mysterious angelic beings. The Inca Illa is bright or to shine. Babylonian Ilu is to shine. There are more, but they all relate to the gods, or special shining beings that created, taught, and controlled mankind. They owned us. Baal, the deity often spoken of as the Lord in the Bible, is also seen as a shining one in the Old Testament and is called the owner. At that time, there were many owners, or shining ones. In fact, there was one for each village. These are the governors of men, shining reptilian alien beings with vast knowledge, and their existence has been passed down to us in religious texts, fables, folklore, and myths. The Elohim were the host of heaven, ascending and descending to pass messages to and from God or the leader, Yahweh. These beings came down to us from the heavens and back again. Some of the shining ones were termed watchers and are akin to the angels of the Lord. Yahweh Elohim means simply leader of the shining ones. So, now we have these plural Elohim, or shining ones as gods, being above even the kings and supplier of watchers to watch over man. The Egyptian Book of the Dead calls these watchers Anubis and Horus. They came from a faraway place. According to the legend of Wotan from Mesoamerica, Wotan was the serpent who was a descendant of the race of Can and was called a guardian or watcher. The Hebrews was supposedly written by Moses. This book, dictated by an alien watcher, was intended as a history of the days of old and reveals the purpose of the watchers. For in his days the angels of the Lord descended upon the earth, those who are named watchers, that they should instruct the children of men, that they should do judgment and uprightness upon the earth. These watchers, according to the book of Jubilees, are the sons of God, spoken of it in Genesis, sent from their heavenly abode to instruct men. What seems to have occurred is that they fell from grace by mating with the daughters of men and were thus outcast, giving us the fallen angels we are familiar with today. As Enoch himself had testified against these fallen watchers, he was protected by the ruling shining ones and transported to the Garden of Eden. The fallen watchers swore an oath and bound themselves together. The place of this action is called Ardis, the fabled summit of Mount Hermon, which derives from the Hebrew word for curse. Following these actions of the fallen watchers, the Shining Ones called down a great flood upon the earth to destroy the offspring, and Noah is warned to build a great ship to escape the impending doom. There was obviously some great battle between the dissenters and the Shining Ones, and even the loyal watchers, which gave rise to Michael, Gabriel, and the others to slay the remaining fallen watchers, and watched. The Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, which contain stories of these ancient aliens, were stricken from the accepted list of religious books and are now known as Apocryphal. What we do know is that these watchers continued in what has been described as the underground stream and were called egregores. The term egregor is Greek and means to rouse from sleep, be excited by passion, to be awake, or to watch. The Thesaurus Temporum, translated into Latin in the mid-17th century, even gives us a chronology of events surrounding these egregores. In 10,000 BC, they descended, and by 1487 BC, they had taken Enoch to paradise due to the descent of the fallen watchers. So here we have the religious and historical texts giving us evidence, plain as day, of the ancient aliens. What we need now is physical evidence, pictures, artifacts, and structures that point to their existence in space and time. In Indian folklore, the Vimana are mythological flying chariots. The Pushpaka Vimana of the king Ravana is the most quoted example of a Vimana. They are mentioned in many places in Hindu and Sanskrit, and also in the Jain texts. The Sanskrit word Vimana literally means measuring out, traversing, or having been measured out. It is a car or a chariot of the gods and serves also as a throne. In some Indian languages, like Vimana or Vinam, means aircraft. Let us not forget that these great ships in the sky were seen thousands of years before mankind had even contemplated inventing aeroplanes. In the Vedas, the Vimana is depicted 3 times, twice flying in the sky and once landing on the ground. In fact, the Vedas have many flying machines before the Vimanas, great chariots that carried the gods in the sky in the same way as Ezekiel's wheel is seen to traverse the heavens in the Bible. The existing Rig Veda versions state that these machines were capable of jumping into space speedily with a craft using fire and water, containing 12 pillars, 1 wheel, 3 machines, 300 pivots, and 60 instruments. In the Hindu epic Ramayana, the Vimana of Ravana is described as follows. The Pushpaka Vimana that resembles the sun and belongs to my brother was brought by the powerful Ravana. That aerial and excellent Vimana going everywhere at will. That chariot resembling a bright cloud in the sky. And the king got in, and the excellent chariot, at the command of the Rigveda, rose up into the higher atmosphere. In Jain literature, the Vimana is a specific class of deity who dwell in the heavens. So these are alien beings, or gods, that are not of this earth and who are more powerful, wise, and knowledgeable than mankind. They travel up and down from the heavens in grand flying chariots. Other aliens from around the world have been left to us in images we now call art, From around 5,000 years ago, there are amazing images in Australia. These alien beings, known as Wodjina, and are beings represented as giants, just as we discovered when the Watchers mated with humans and created a race of giants. These aliens have no mouths or ears, with cone-shaped heads. They are, in fact, reptilian or serpent-like. They are no different to the Anunnaki Watchers or any other number of ancient alien sightings from around the world. And yet, these civilizations are separated by thousands of miles and vast oceans. They are also said to have bred with humanity and created a hybrid race. In Utah, there are cave paintings created by the Anasazi and Fremont Native Americans that date right back to 5000 BC. These are, simply put, depictions of the ancient aliens, large-eyed giants called the Star People, from where they came. It is said these aliens came down to Earth, created mankind, and then returned to their heavenly home. The exact same story we have been finding across the world, and a tale that can be found everywhere, from China to... Did these aliens really leave us alone, or have they been visiting us? In fact, the list is almost endless and comes right up to modern times, with thousands of sightings across the globe. Bright, shining craft seen in the sky, reptilian aliens with serpent-like aspects, observing mankind, or, as our ancestors would say, watching. Millions of people around the world have witnessed UFOs. Millions have undergone some bizarre experience, from tunnels of light to out-of-body experiences, from alien abduction to visions of unearthly apparitions. Millions more remain silent through fear of being ridiculed. The fact is, what modern man is experiencing is not new. In fact, it has been going on for millennia. The various recorded histories of the world reveal the truth. We are told about the experience. We are given the knowledge of amazing machinery. We are even given the names of those ancient gods who gave humanity incredible knowledge. We know them today as the Watchers. They came, they taught humanity art, culture, architecture, agriculture, and science. They became masters over mankind, and a hybrid race was born. But all was not well in Eden, and a great battle ensued. These Watchers were also known as Urshu, and were classed as being less divine than the gods. The ancients spoke of a time 3 great religions Abraham is also said to have trained. He was trained by the Shining Ones, the Watchers, the great lights from the sky, and he started the yoke of mainstream religion on this planet. On the other side of the world, it appears these Shining Ones and Watchers also descended. According to the legend of Wotan from Mesoamerica, this Wotan was the serpent who was descendant of the race of Can and was called a guardian or watcher, amazingly similar to Canaan. These Canaanites were implicated in many places, revolving around the Shining Ones and the original serpent priests. From this time onwards, serpent worship spread across the globe, and we have to wonder why. The Hebrews termed these watchers as Nun Reshenayin, meaning those who watch. In the Greek, this is translated as gigantes, or giants, a race that even the writer Hesiod featured as being monstrous. Now we can understand the role of the giants, seen across the world of folklore, as the presence of the Watchers. The title cherubim means exiles and is an indication of the origins of the angels, exiled from their own homeland or planet. Enoch, the consecrated one, would later write up in the history of these fallen angels who spread across the globe as the great shining ones, teaching, measuring, and building the world's most mysterious ancient monuments. Of course, we must not forget the seraphim of Numbers 21:6 and elsewhere. These mystical beings have hands, a face, legs, and great powers from God because they are in the light. They have symbolic wings, meaning they could fly. Their name means shining ones or fiery serpents. They are enlightened beings. Mystical Jewish literature tells us that the angels can fly, tell the future, shapeshift, speak Hebrew, and are emanations of the divine shining light. In the Old Testament, God is indistinguishable from the angel or messenger known as Yahweh. He looks the same and acts as his representative. There is no difference here from Babylonian and Egyptian records. In fact, the stories are similar across the world. In the New Testament, the angels actually take part in the judgment at the end times. Is this an indication that one day they shall return? When they do, it appears they will judge mankind. We are told also about the Nephilim, or Watchers. These are the angels who seem to have been the military arm of the Shining Ones, and who are initially employed to guard the Garden of Eden, but then began to mix with the indigenous peoples of the area. From this union, a hybrid race was produced, a race of giants. They were termed insurgents. These insurgents also passed on knowledge and taught combat and how to make weapons. And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, the bracelets and ornaments and the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids and all kinds of costly stones and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Book of Enoch. All this was seen as a violation against the set of laws laid down by the Shining Ones, who were possessive of their knowledge. Enoch, a scribe who was taught by the Shining Ones, was then accompanied as a messenger or intermediary between the Shining Ones and these fallen ones, who had decided to abandon their divinity to live amongst the tribes of man. Enoch was then sent to tell the insurgents that a severe sentence had been passed on them and that they were soon to be punished. In brief, the punishment sent is the flood. It is as if the Shining Ones wanted to wash away the sins of the earth that had been created by their own kind, the fallen ones. However, not all these watchers descended from the heavenly abode, and those that did not were termed holy watchers, residing in the fifth heaven. As Enoch himself had testified against these fallen watchers, he was protected by the ruling Shining Ones and transported to the Garden of Eden. The legacy of Enoch would continue and find itself rooted in the secret societies of the world. Enoch is to be found in the mysteries of modern alchemists, mystics, and seers, is seen in the 13th century text of A. Bar Hebreus, who spent many years investigating the ancient texts at the Library of Malaga, and gives us this unique insight. The ancient Greeks say that Enoch is Hermes Trismegistos. This is none other than Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes, whom all mystics hold in high esteem, as having passed down ancient and profound secrets, and who is seen as the father of almost all Western secret orders. Whether or not the actual Shining Ones, Watchers or Egregor, were actually around physically during this vast space of time is a subject of much debate still. But what this does show is that the ancient influence of the Shining Ones was certainly still in existence. Today, the Egregor is seen in occult circles as an energy form. Indeed, they are an apostolic succession of power, suggests John Michael Greer in Inside a Magical Lodge. "Worship me," cries the Egregor. "I am the Son of God. You are nothing but a worthless and sinful creature, damned from birth and destined to hell were it not for my sacrifice, and without me you shall never reach heaven." But how did they reach heaven? The Great Pyramid of Giza was seen as a gateway to the stars. In his paper, The Great Pyramid Texts, Clesson Harvey points out in the Pyramids of Saqqara, there are more than 3,000 columns of text known from the 5th and 6th dynasties, which he believes hold the secret to the pyramid's use. These texts include incantations and magical formula that used to be invoked in certain locations around the pyramid. But in the upper passage, chamber, gallery and shaft is an incredibly old, unmistakable megalithic glyph. This glyph or phrase translates remarkably into star door and tunneling open gate. Because glyphs are sadly lacking from most pyramids, this information is a startling discovery. Egyptologists claim that the star is mythological and leave it at that. But could this really be the case? With all the information about ancient watchers having descended to Earth, we have to wonder. We already know that the Egyptians called Giza Rastal, which means gateway to the other world. What is this other world? Could the Great Pyramid actually be a massive transport device, whether to physically travel or mentally, to another place, another world? And the fact is, the Great Pyramid never did contain a body. No evidence of a pharaoh was ever discovered. Nothing. But there must be more evidence of ancient buildings with this peculiar inbuilt design. There is. One of the peculiar archaeological evidences we have of the ancient watchers are the round towers. What was being watched is a matter of some debate. It may have been the people, or it may have been the stars. Indeed, it is highly likely they were built for both, as well as for search for aggressors. These round towers are worldwide, and strangely are linked to mysteries of serpent worship in almost every instance. Tall, elegant, round structures built by cultures as diverse as the Irish Celts and early Christians, to the Hopi Indians and Egyptians, all of which are linked with serpent worship. Even the Dead Sea Scrolls refer to towers protected by angels or watchers. Gradwell, writing in the 19th century, pointed out that St. Patrick and his followers almost invariably selected those sacred sites of paganism and built their wooden churches under the shadow of the round towers, then as mysterious and inscrutable as they are today. The Phoenicians had similar structures, dedicated to their serpent rain and water deity, Baal. There are thousands of these towers scattered across Sardinia, just north of the Phoenician city of Carthage, dating to at least 2,000 years before Christ. There are also those who believe that these towers served as astronomical tools, similar to Stonehenge, and this may be the case also. The tower in Iran, called Radkan, which means serpent, is thought to be one of these, and like the European towers of much later date, it has a conical cap. In the Naga, or serpent homeland of India, the round tower became the stupa, and in China, the pagoda, both other forms of round tower. Further round towers can be found as far away as South America, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Chichen Itza, Africa, and many more. All are related to the serpent energy and the serpent cult, and many have the same astronomical alignments. Indeed, the Hopi snake tribe actually refer to them as snake houses. These shining ones of the world are the first on paper. They have a structure and a basis of authority. They rule over man and are all wise, having their watchers to ensure that their instructions are carried out. The texts and the archaeology reveal to us stories of strange-looking serpent-like humanoids that descended to Earth, took control of mankind, created civilization, instructed humanity, and even bred with them. We see glimpses of a catastrophe or battle, and the ascent again of these beings back to their other world. But those hybrid men and women, formed from a union of alien stock and earthly humanity, remained, and they would go on to become the kings and queens of society. Their bloodline was so special, so divine, that they would not breed again outside their own, and their lineage had to be defended at all cost. The blood of aliens walks upon this earth to this day, and those behind the scenes of power know all too well. But have the original aliens returned also? Across the world, thousands of men and women have seen UFOs with their own eyes. They have seen alien beings. They have even come into contact with them. The fact is, there have been hundreds of UFOs crashed onto our planet, and we have witnessed them. In Brazil, a whole town witnessed strange orange alien life forms emerging from a crashed ship. In the US, police, firemen, mayors, and ordinary people have witnessed UFO crashes dozens of times. In Saudi Arabia, F-16s actually shot down an invading UFO craft. In Kiev, archaeologists uncovered a crashed ship that was hundreds of years old, and so advanced in technology, they covered it up again for future generations to deal with. In Russia, a fighter plane collided with a massive UFO, and both crashed. In Australia, a massive green ship burned across the sky and crashed. A soldier entered the craft and emerged shaken. The aliens were still alive and screaming. Across the world, people are paralyzed, abducted, abused, and terrorized. Landscapes are burned and scarred. Towns are closed down. Radio stations threatened, and lies are spread. But the truth can be seen when we expose all the evidence. When we bring the hundreds of UFO crashes together in one story, there is a pattern. But what are the aliens doing? Why are they crashing? Are we at war? Our secretive military and inner governments know what is happening, and they are hiding it from us. They close down every site, cordon off, recover technology and corpses, and then they have been doing so for decades, and we are being fooled. Why? Because we are at war once again with the shining ones from the skies. We live on a very big planet, in an even bigger solar system, with a massive galaxy that is only one of trillions inside a vast universe. With every passing day, scientists are discovering that life exists in places they previously believed to be barren. They discovered water in massive deposits on distant planets. They find fatty acids on Mars and strange gas plumes that should never be there. When we walk into the desert on our own planet, we say that there can be no life. And yet, nature finds a way. The truth is that the deserts of our world are teeming with life. We just have to alter our perception and search a little harder. If life can find a way in searing heat with minuscule amounts of water, then surely it can find a way somewhere in the vast universe. There are galaxies out there, billions of years older than our own. Somewhere out there, alien life forms exist, and somewhere they have the technology so advanced that it will be beyond our own imagination. Of this, there is no doubt. Surely these life forms are curious about the same things. Surely they have pushed out into the universe to find the truth. Surely they have found us. But wouldn't we have evidence? The fact is that we do have evidence. We have it in abundance. Aliens have reached out. They have found us, and they have visited us. In December 1965, residents of a small village in Pennsylvania witnessed a green light streaking across the sky before it crashed in a field. Eyewitnesses described the object as acorn-shaped and twice the size of a family car. Local fireman James Romansky, who was at the scene for 15 minutes, stated the vehicle had hieroglyphic markings around its lower rim. This in itself links right back to our tales of alien visitors from ancient times, teaching mankind the art of writing. Within minutes, the military and unknown government officials arrived, cordoned off the area and placed armed guards. It was assumed at the time that the craft was of Soviet origin, and yet they have strenuously denied such claims. In 2009, a Freedom of Information request was issued to NASA, who had to admit that the case files were missing. This scenario is one that we discover again and again. Ordinary people witnessing objects crashing to Earth, rushing to assist and finding themselves escorted from the scene by military and plain-clothed officials. The Russians often get the blame, and yet these sightings occur all around the globe, and very often in Russia, where the USA gets the blame. There are several things we need to note before we proceed. Firstly, sightings around the world are incredibly similar. Secondly, the sightings span decades, and yet the objects appear to have a consistency we would not expect if human technology was being employed. Our flying machines have changed from the 1940s to the present day. These huge numbers of UFO crash sightings all have the same range of objects: saucers, orbs, triangles, and cigar shapes. Often the shapes are difficult to see because the craft is hidden in flames. The next case is like this, and on the other side of the world, in Australia. It was 1977, and we are in Western Australia, north of the Air Highway. Witnesses saw in the sky a green fireball speeding across the sky and crashing. Within a few hours, a retrieval team was on the scene, who discovered a large, heavily damaged triangular object, slightly smaller than a conventional airliner. Nobody could identify the craft. Reports state that 2 men had already been on the scene before the retrieval teams arrived. One of them claimed to be from the Australian Army. He had entered the craft and emerged shaken. He had stated clearly to witnesses that the occupants were still alive. He was taken away and decontaminated. The second man, not surprisingly, was said to have been from the US. This second man was taken away. According to a leak from within the military, the Australian was interrogated for 2 weeks to ensure he would not be a threat to security. Of the 2 beings inside the craft, one died. The other was squealing. They were said to have thin, long arms and large stomachs, and stood around 5 feet tall. They had large, solid black eyes. According to the informant, the retrieval was a joint US and Australian team sent out to recover alien technology and life forms. A Saudi Arabian newspaper reported that an American Air Force F-16 fighter jet actually shot down a UFO. The paper Decades later, saucers with strange material are still flying around and still crashing. The Russian colonel got a good look at this one and said that he assumed the Americans had brought it down with a ground-to-air missile because a third of it was missing. He saw the markings on the instrument panels and said that it was not in any language he had ever seen. There were 3 small chairs unsuitable for humans. The strangest thing was this: there were no beings in the craft, nor was there any engine. He stated, "The American missiles may have scored a direct hit on the engine, causing it to disintegrate. But I checked with the Saudi radar technicians, and they claim their instruments didn't show anyone ejecting or bailing out from the craft. Search helicopters were all over the area, which is a desert, and they did not spot any survivors in the vicinity of the crash." He said there were things they didn't want us to see more, I think, than the fact that the aircraft was circular, that there were no survivors, and that it was made of a foreign substance. His team members managed to get photographs, but were later ordered to hand them over by senior Russian authorities. That's the last anybody knows about the crashed UFO of Saudi Arabia. One startling point about this case is the US government are obviously not feeling too friendly towards UFOs. We have to ask the question, is there some kind of war afoot that we are not aware of? It's not just wartime that brings out crashed UFOs, though. There are some areas of the world that have prolific sightings. South America, for instance, is a hotbed of UFO activity. In 1996, the Brazilian town of Varginha gave witness to something quite strange. Dozens of witnesses shocked by the sudden appearance of small orange beings, seemingly on the run from something. They were captured by the local fire service and taken to hospital, where again dozens of witnesses saw them. It all ended with the swift intervention of the US military. Where did they come from? Many believe they came from a crashed UFO downed by the US. North America is not free of its own events. On Friday the 13th of October 2000, witnesses in Elk City, Oklahoma, saw several US fighter planes in hot pursuit of a UFO. It crashed north of a city at a farm after being seen by dozens of people as far west as Shamrock in Texas. A local ufologist called Jim Hammond said, "I noticed a bright luminous vapor trail that went from the southwest to the northeast. There were several other trails in the area to the north, but they seemed smaller lights around the object, with vapors coming out of them. NORAD reported it as a large meteor shower. Witnesses on the ground disagreed entirely. Another crash in 1996 near Mexico City was witnessed by hundreds of people. A huge glowing light that changed size and color, crossing the sky at incredible speeds. Splitting into around 7 lights, it lost speed and then crashed on the slopes of a volcano. The whole thing was witnessed for miles around, and radio stations were inundated with reports. Many of the witnesses were highly professional men and women. One anthropologist said the object had been incandescent and followed by other objects as it made its way towards the volcano. Again, no decent explanation, and a lot of cover-up ensued. A year later in Puerto Rico, reports flooded in of a crashed UFO near a small town of Leyes. The crash caused a bushfire, causing some to claim it was just a meteor, but astronomy experts insisted there would have been a crater. It appeared from all the evidence that whatever it was burned up before impact and set fire to the dry vegetation. Radio stations reported transmission difficulties just after the explosions and electromagnetic interference. Then the military were called in and again, in usual fashion, cordoned off, recovered debris and covered up. The US Coast Guard joined in and said there had possibly been an aircraft crash. No repeats. This is life from another planet. They have been coming for a very, very long time. And if it is true that our military is shooting them down, then that can only mean one thing. We are at war with the aliens again.